Hello, and welcome to the NASCIO 2020 Mid-Year Webcast Series. I'm Dennis Goulet, NASCIO President and the Commissioner of the Department of Information Technology for the great state of New Hampshire. I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy. These are trying times, even in the best of circumstances. We are all adjusting to doing things a little differently right now, and NASCIO is no exception. Though it was of course necessary, we certainly hated to cancel the in-person mid-year conference. I want to give a huge thank you to the Programs Committee. They helped shape two conferences in the span of a few months. First, the in-person event, and then this virtual event. Last year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of NASCIO. In those 50 years, only one other conference was canceled. That was the 2001 annual conference, which was scheduled to be held in New Orleans shortly after the attacks on September 11. NASCIO returned to the city to host the annual conference in 2004. We know we will return to meeting in person, hopefully very soon, but the health and safety of our members and everyone affiliated with making events happen is our top priority. We miss seeing you all, but are excited to connect virtually over the next 2 days. One way to stay connected is through the Virtual Networking Lounge, which is a group on the NASCIO community. All mid-year participants should have received an email with a number of details on what to know for a successful event. In this email was a link to the Networking Lounge and information on accessing the community if you've not done so before. While this doesn't replace the face-to-face interaction, it is a place we can go to have those conversations that would have occurred on site. Please visit the community after the sessions and discuss content and share your own related stories and resources. We encourage you to start discussion threads on other topics as well, and just check in and say hello to your colleagues. If you need assistance with the community, or really anything mid-year related, please email Emily Lane on the NASCIO team at elane, E-L-A-N-E, at nascio.org. She will get your question to the correct person for a quick answer. In the Virtual Networking Lounge, you'll see an announcement about our Give Back partner, Bite Back. As a way of thanking our host community, NASCIO partners with a local organization to highlight their important work and collect monetary donations. Even though we aren't on site in our national harbor, we did want to continue our partnership with our Give Back partner. We are very happy to have with us Elizabeth Lindsay, the Executive Director of Bite Back. We have a quick video to show, and then Elizabeth will let us know what Bite Back is doing to help the DC area community, especially during this time. Now for the video.
I think about my life now, and I would not be sitting here and have this incredible life if not for the amazing educational opportunities that I've had. Bite Back is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Washington, D.C. We train unemployed and underemployed adults in technology, and we help them move into living wage careers that use tech. Most of our students have not gone to college. Many have grown up in low-income communities where they don't have access to technology.
Bite Back has opened my eyes up and has brought me new opportunities that I really never thought I would have. I gave myself that chance, and now I'm making more.
I ended up being a supervisor on the first job.
The possibilities are endless.
I'm just so excited about the future of the tech sector, and I'm so excited about the future for them.
Hello, Dennis, thank you so much for having us here again this year. And we really would have loved to be in person, as you said. But welcome everyone to the conference, and thank you so much for giving Bite Back just a few minutes to share a little bit more about what we do. So as you just saw in the video, Bite Back is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we train adults in Baltimore and Washington, D.C., and the D.C. suburbs. And we work with people who have never had an opportunity to learn how to use technology. And we help them get foundational tech skills and then move into living wage careers, jobs in admin as administrative assistants, jobs in IT, jobs that help them to be able to support themselves and their families. It is such a different world, obviously, than last year when I had the amazing opportunity to speak to many of you in person. And every day I think about how lucky I am and how lucky my children are that we are able to go to school and go to work safely from our homes. And we are able to do that because we know how to use technology and we have jobs that enable us to do that. Many of the individuals who are out working at grocery stores or delivering food are people who don't have the same privilege. They're people who don't have jobs that are tech-based or computer-based, and so they have to go out in order to make a living. And that really is the gap that Bite Back is here to fill. We work with people who are so excited and so passionate about having a career and making sure that they can have a job that's exciting and safe and that makes them comfortable, and we help them get to that position. Like all organizations and companies and governments, we've had to swiftly pivot to teaching our courses online. And that's really provided a set of challenges that I think many companies and organizations don't have. Because we work with adults who, some of whom are pretty new to technology, helping them get set up on these different platforms is not easy. And I think even more challenging for us is the fact that many of our students don't have a computer at home, or they don't have broadband, and or they're using a phone for their internet, and so they're not able to both take online training and have their kids do their courses online and have their partners using the computer to look for a job. And so we've been really hit with a set of costs that we couldn't have anticipated. We've been collecting donations of laptops to donate to our students. We've been helping them to sign up for some free and low-cost internet offers, but those sometimes don't work. And so we've had to buy hotspots for many of our students. And so I'm so proud of the fact that we've been able to already, since this began, teach 77 people virtually, and we have 3 new classes starting this week. And this is the first time in our 23-year history that we've taught our classes online. So I want to thank you all for your support. Thank you again for having Bite Back here. And if you all can make a donation to support our work, it would really go such a far way for us in terms of not only continuing to teach, but getting those devices and internet to the people who really need them.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and Bite Back. A lot of what you're doing sounds like the kind of adapting we're having to do as well. And
Exactly.
and I remember when we had I first became aware of you last year. I was just amazed and heartwarmed by the changes in people's lives that you and Bite Back have been able to make. So to make a donation, please visit Bite Back directly at biteback.org. Their website is also linked from the announcement in the networking lounge. Registration for the in-person event wasn't open too long, but some of our members did make a donation through that registration process. A big thank you to those folks whose name are listed on the slide for their generosity. Everyone on this list also happens to be longtime friends of NASCIO, and we appreciate their involvement. Many of you have not been able to join us at in-person events. Welcome. We're glad to have you here virtually. During events, we use polling as a way to check in with the audience and break the ice among attendees, often with fun questions. We're going to do that now. You'll see a poll question on your screen in just a moment. The first one is easy to get everyone warmed up. Oh, wow, look at that. So I think that's a little different than what we usually see. That's great to it's great to have a lot of first timers here. I think the accessibility of this platform helps in that respect, and we had 0 people take the joke option, which is unusual too. Usually we have a small percentage of people that take the joke option. One thing we will miss in person is honoring the recipient of the 2020 Technology Champion Award. This award recognizes outstanding individual contributions to the field of information technology in the public sector. Recipients further NASCIO's vision of a government in which the public is fully served through efficient and effective use of technology policy. The recipient of the 2020 Technology Champion Award is Kevin Jones, CIO of the Indiana Department of Child Services. Kevin was nominated for this honor by Terry Lewis, Managing Director of Health and Human Services Practices at Accenture. Terry wrote of Kevin that he is the epitome of CIO as problem solver, with a personal leadership style grounded in empathy for the 25,000 children in his care and the 4,000 family caseworkers who support them. Kevin was interviewed for the NASCIO Voices podcast. That episode is out today. I encourage you to listen and learn how Kevin is making a difference in his state. Congratulations, Kevin. Typically, we kick off a conference with a motivational or inspirational keynote. We have an abbreviated version of that for you with a message from Brett Culp about thriving in this uncertain time. Many of you may remember Brett, who joined us in San Diego for the 2018 annual conference. He delivered a talk called Superhero Leadership: How Everyday People Can Have an Extraordinary Impact. Brett is also a documentary filmmaker and has recently completed a project showcasing everyday people who had overcome huge obstacles and unselfishly given to their community. The common factor was that all had embraced their inner superhero because of their love of Batman. His talk highlighted the lessons learned in making the film, hence the title, Superhero Leadership. If you didn't see Brett in San Diego or would like to watch again, the recording of the full hour-long keynote is posted in the networking lounge. This video is about 8 minutes. We hope you enjoy.
Hi there, it's Brett Culp. You know, when I look at my calendar, it wasn't that long ago that we were together in San Diego for the annual conference of the National Association of State Chief Information Officers. And I was honored to be a keynote speaker with you at that event. On my calendar, it wasn't that long ago, but in my heart and in my mind, it feels like an eternity. My goodness. In the past month, it feels like we've lived through an entire decade of history. So much change, so much has happened. And you've been on my mind in the work that you're doing. I can't imagine all of the changes and shifts and everything you've gone through just in the past few weeks. So I wanted to take a few moments today just to share a few thoughts that I think might be helpful for you as you go through this time of being a leader and working to make a difference for your team and in every part of your life and your work. Before I share those thoughts, I just want to say this. You know, it's very possible that in this moment, you are feeling a weight, a heaviness, an unsettledness, a sorrow that is unlike anything you've ever felt before. You may find yourself crying in the shower or holding tightly to your steering wheel to the point where your knuckles are getting white and you don't even realize you're doing it. Maybe your temper is much shorter with people that you love in ways that you've never been before. Or you're having emotions and outbursts of emotions that are not typical for you. I just want to say, if you're experiencing that kind of grief and unsettledness and uncertainty in your heart right now, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're human. You're not weird. I think we're all going through this right now, this sense of grief and sorrow that we can't quite explain, that it may take us months to really understand and be able to communicate properly. But I just want you to know that it's okay. It's okay. And you will get through this time. And I'm sorry that you're going through it, but it's okay. You're okay. And there's nothing wrong with you. Okay, let me share a couple ideas that might be helpful. First, I think this is a time where we need to celebrate everything, even the small victories. You know, typically we only celebrate the big milestones and the big accomplishments. But I think this is a moment where we need to celebrate all of it. And here's why. You know, usually in life, it's things are easy to do. Not easy, but much easier. The things that we did, that we accomplished on our to-do lists 2 months ago, they are now taking more energy, focus, and commitment than ever before. Because everything's in transition. We are doing things in so many new ways that it's overwhelming. You know, if you're a parent, you have now become a teacher of your students and managing all of these things. And you're also trying to figure out the right way and new ways just to feed yourself and your family. Are you supposed to go to the grocery store and wear a mask? Are you supposed to have the food delivered? Are you supposed to wipe down everything with Lysol wipes before you bring it in your home? I mean, we don't have all the answers. And we're trying to figure this out as we go. And you add on to that all the changes in our work of figuring out how to work from home and whole new formats and protocols and ways of getting things done and engaging with your team members. I mean, it's a whole new world right now. And so everything is harder. Everything is more difficult. And so I think we need to celebrate all of it. Even the little things, to find spaces where you can acknowledge and share those stories of great things that are going on that might have seemed like insignificant. They were insignificant before, but now they mean a lot. So take a moment for that sort of gratitude and appreciation. Even when you feel like you're getting nothing done and you're gaining no ground, stop and acknowledge what is being done that is good in your world. Also, I think this is a time to be ready for giant leaps and bold steps. You know, usually we like for change to be incremental, to happen slowly over time. We're not trying to shock the system. But this is a moment where the system has already been shocked from forces and powers that are beyond our control that we can't do anything about. And so I think now is a moment to be open and ready for giant leaps and bold steps, for great innovations that may push us forward for years ahead into new ideas and breakthroughs that we had never considered before, but that now are just essential. We have to do them. And so for you and your heart and for your team to prepare them to be ready for things to shift in major ways in the days ahead. I think also this is a time where we need to focus, where you need to focus on your epic journey. Your epic journey. Not the short term, but the long term. You know, we love to walk into a movie theater and in 90 minutes see the beginning, the middle, and the end. We see it all in less than 2 hours. But this is a moment where it's going to take a long time for things to unfold, for things to get clear. And if you are judging your work and your accomplishments and your effort based on just 1 quarter or 1 month period or one season of your work, you are very likely to feel like a failure, to feel like you got nothing done and you just in fact lost ground and things got worse in the process. But you can't think that way about this. You have to focus on the epic journey your story is telling and your work is telling. And you've always known that was the case. You have always known in your work that it was about the long game, that these journeys were never about 5 minutes or 5 months or sometimes even just 1 year, that it was about that long game. Now more than ever, it's important for you to see that in your work. When we were together, I ended my keynote with the image, the idea of stars and starlight. Because when you look up at the night sky, you see light that left those stars years, decades, sometimes centuries ago. And it's just arriving now. That has always been the nature of your work. For it to take time, for it to be a long, epic journey. But now, more than ever, my friend, you are starlight. Shining through the darkness, unwavering in your course, until you reach your destination. That has always been the nature of your work. But now, the world and the communities and the individuals and the families and the organizations that you serve need you to stay focused on that long, epic journey that your work is telling. They need that leadership from you. They need that focus on not taking the shortcuts and doing the easy things, but stepping up and doing the difficult things that you know in the long term are the right moves. They're the right moves. It's not easy, but being a leader never is. And that is at the heart of who you are and what you do every day. So my friend, thank you for continuing to be a hero. Thanks for being you. Keep shining.
Well, thank you, Brett. That was amazing. As it was when we heard from you last time. I know that for my own part, I have felt overwhelmed at times and wondering, is this going to end? And so I can totally relate to that. And I know that the rest of the CIOs in the room would agree that that we need to celebrate those successes. And we're having lots of successes. I know from speaking to other CIOs that that there's great collaboration, super fast progress, unlike anything we've seen. And so thank you so much for reminding us that it's okay to be overwhelmed, but the world does depend on us. And so we need to persevere and keep going. If you were inspired by Brett's message and need something uplifting to watch this evening, Brett's film, Legends of the Night, is available for streaming. You can learn more at his website, brettculp.com. Earlier, I mentioned we like to have some fun with our poll questions. I have one of those for you now. We anticipate many of you are joining from home, so we're going to ask the question on everyone's mind. Well, I think a lot of us can relate to the the 28% answer, thankful that webcam isn't on. But I think athleisure is the clear winner, and from what I understand about the availability of certain athleisure wear on the market, I'd say lots of people have been buying it. Whatever your attire, we do appreciate you joining us. We know many of you have competing or even overlapping priorities right now. You may be watching this at home while your spouse also works and your kids are homeschooling. Or maybe you have a pet that's demanding attention. Because our environments are a little out of control right now, all participants have been muted and will remain so throughout the session. Our speakers are saving time for questions at the end, though. You can submit questions via the sidebar. Those will be submitted to the host and then sent on to our panel at the right time. We've been asked if this webcast series will be business as usual or focused on COVID-19. Since we're living through the situation, we're not sure there is a business as usual that doesn't at least touch on the impact of COVID-19. With that said, many of our speakers are eager to talk about how we move forward and what we can learn to make state IT even stronger. This first session will be more real-time than the others. We will hear about the COVID-19 experience and their perceptions on COVID-19. In an effort to make this dispersed event feel more personal, like a NASCIO event, panelists will join with their web cameras and have a conversation with one another. There will not be slides or formal presentations. If any resources are referenced, they will be shared in the networking lounge. All sessions will be recorded and posted to nascio.org for everyone by the end of this week. Our panel this morning includes Jim Weaver, CIO of Washington, who will serve as moderator, Kurt Wood, CIO of Massachusetts, and Stephanie Dedman, CIO of Tennessee. I will turn this over to the panel and to Jim as moderator.
Thank you, Dennis, and good morning, everybody. As the panelist virtually enters the lounge, so to speak, I think I speak for all our panelist members when I say we wish we were there in person and be able to network and enjoy the camaraderie and the social aspects of our community. We miss each other dearly as much as we've been interacting virtually. I'm one of those who wishes the webcam was not on because I have not enjoyed a haircut now for over 2 months, and it's probably going to be another month for me. Anybody who knows me, I can't stand this mop on my head, but nonetheless, I'm trying to, my pain point. As we move forward, we're going to talk a little bit about the start of COVID and what each of us did, respectively, in our states as we move forward with the pandemic. As many of you know, the state of Washington was the first confirmed case nationally back in January. So we've been involved with the COVID response activities for over 100 days now. It seems like a lot, but it just seems like yesterday when this all began, so to speak. But I want to talk to both Stephanie and Curtis, respectively, from their states. So let's go to early March, end of February, March, and this was coming. We saw the wave coming, if you will, of activities. So can you each talk a little bit, respectively, from your states about, what did you look like before we went into the pandemic response, before the stay-at-home orders were issued, respectively, by governors? What was your remote environment like? Supply chain considerations you may have had? Concerns around cyber? I know we're going to have a session, I think, later in the series on cyber. Leadership during this crisis as well, and how did you look at your remote workforce management? So, Stephanie, why don't we start with you in Tennessee?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Jim. Many of you may remember that the state of Tennessee actually has had a formal work from home process in place for about 6 or 7 years now. So when we started, a little under 30% of our workforce was already working from home. Most were not full-time, admittedly, but we quickly with the administration and the encouragement of the governor, worked to understand and deploy all the technology needed to up our game from a work from home standpoint. As of today, we're at about 54% of our workforce is working from home full time. One thing I'll add is that we had the unfortunate dry run of this emergency with the tornadoes that hit Middle Tennessee early the morning of March 3rd. So just a few days before the first case hit Tennessee, first COVID-19 case hit Tennessee, we had many state buildings that were without power. So we had the opportunity to kind of go through the things we needed to in short order for that tornado, and then a few weeks later sent a majority of the workforce home. I'll just touch on we worked with our central procurement office to make sure we had the emergency procurement processes in place to quickly procure what was needed. We procured and deployed about 2,200 laptops to equip the workforce the additional workforce that wasn't capable of working from home. Let me stop there. I know I've touched on a couple of areas, and we can come back to some of the areas, but do you want me to kick it over to Curtis to describe his pre-March situation?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. So yeah, in Massachusetts, over the past year or so, we've been involved in a modern workforce environment initiative with Microsoft, where we were looking to fully deploy 365 in the entire environment. And one of the objectives was to go to a single device. So we were in the midst of expanding our telework. We've been a state that's had telework now for probably 5 or 6 years at a strong pace, but really not at the numbers we see today. So we had a program, and interestingly, right before this hit, our state human resources division had just published a new policy on telework, and we're promoting it out to our cabinets and agencies as a new program. And interestingly, many of our agencies and secretariats were a little bit reluctant to jump all in on a telework or to expand telework. I think basically, the history of providing direct care, direct services, and having state employees provide direct services to the people of the Commonwealth of Mass. So a lot of the agencies, Health and Human Services, our transportation divisions, their public safety, they're not used to having people work from home too much. We're a little bit kind of like, okay, let me think about this a little bit. But they were starting to grasp it. Like I said, I think overall, we probably, any given day, we probably have 1,000 people teleworking pre-COVID. And then when this hit, like I said, we had the framework. We had to go into some emergency procurement. We were in the process of actually deploying a laptop to everybody in lieu of a workstation with a monitor anyway. But what happened was our program got interrupted with emergency. The supply chain dwindled on us very quickly with the manufacturer we were using, and we had to go into an emergency procurement. We ended up procuring about 7,200 laptops in a matter of about 4 or 5 weeks. So since then, we've been able to deploy over 7,000 laptops at a fairly rapid pace. Today, we have approximately 43,000 state employees on the executive branch. But we also have several thousand of constitutional independents that leverage our resources that have also been moving to remote workforce. So in the executive branch, we have about 20,000 on average any given day working remotely. If you kind of break out our first responder and Health and Human Services and our direct care workers, probably we've got about 85 to 90% of the workforce in the back office workforce working remotely. I would say that it certainly didn't go without challenge. I do think our framework was there. We certainly had to, ramp up from a VPN infrastructure perspective, and from, people learning how to work remotely. That was one of our biggest challenges, I think, was to be able to, transition so quickly with a workforce that was used to working in an office environment or in a field location, and be able to access their apps and actually understand how to work from home in a prolonged period. So, and that goes from the line staff, also from a management staff as well. We focused on really essential services and critical services. I think, like most folks, we just focused on really the essential services that we needed to keep going. So again, a good experience. I think it certainly has, I think from a Commonwealth perspective, I think the work we had done in the past year or so to be prepared for that from a network perspective, from infrastructure and desktop, I think, we were pleasantly surprised. I was actually very surprised at how successful we were in a very short order. And I think before I wrap it up, I would say that I think, our business community, I think, was also probably even more surprised we were able to perform. And we've actually been on the benefit of, not to tout our own horns, but which I'm very proud of the team, is that we've been able to far exceed, I think, expectations of the workforce, the business force, that we were able to stand up and deploy and support people in so many different, environments, and bring people together and provide leadership. And honestly, I've said this before, in my public safety background, from a readiness and preparedness framework and from incident command structure that I've been trained in over the years, I actually implemented that during this process with our agency CIOs and our business, and I just took charge and just really started to build that framework of communication and setting expectations, and working with the business to prioritize and not react to everything. So now that's not to say it hasn't been without challenge. It certainly has, but I think overall very successful.
Yeah, in Washington, we all had a similar experience as well. We've very robust teleworking policies that were in place. We averaged about 3,000 to 5,000, give or take, teleworkers. However, our peak was only about 7,500, and that occurred last year during the what we call out Western Washington Snowmageddon, where Western Washington got 6 to 12 inches of snow. And Western Washington is totally different from Eastern Washington as far as how snow is handled. So we went up to a peak usage about 7,500. Today, we're sitting here close, somewhere between 28 and 29,000 users concurrently. And that number is slowly crawling up as more and more people are being onboarded to help out our Employment Securities Department with unemployment activities. So along those lines, one of the challenges we saw in Washington was the paradigm changed. As we look at our security tools and we look at how we were looking at traffic and those types of activities, that whole pattern changed. And now traffic was coming in differently and stressing other areas of the infrastructure that historically may not have been as robust as a lot of the internal traffic mechanisms were. Did you guys see those kind of challenges from a cyber or risk mitigation? And how did you tackle those or address those? So Stephanie, if you want to take that one first, or?
Sure. Although I would say, because we had been, continuing to up our work from home numbers, and so some of the tools we had in place, I feel like I need to knock on wood, we haven't seen a lot of difference to date. I mean, we've been expecting it and hearing about it and monitoring. But things have, in that area, surprisingly, have sort of maintained where we were before. I can't say that I have anything to add on that.
Okay.
I would echo Stephanie. I mean, we had a fairly aggressive campaign over the past couple of years from a cybersecurity perspective, and really moving things to the middle from a framework perspective. And we've started to build out, a lot of capacity here in Massachusetts. I think, we've, over the past couple of years, we've done a lot of, collaboration, information sharing with our partners, from a public safety perspective, a DHS perspective, done a much better job of communicating out to our agencies and setting expectations. We've had a fairly robust security awareness program underway. We really worked hard on communication and collaboration. I think from a network perspective, we've certainly, seen an uptick in, for the lack of a better term, probes or pings against our network. And, we see a lot more activity coming in from, Russia and China, but nothing that I don't think was anticipated. And I think, folks were really very nervous about this, but I think it's expected. I do think we've spent more time focusing on folks, making sure they understand, phishing campaigns, both in text or email. We certainly have really good defenses. I think, that being said, I think still good basic hygiene, and, from a human element perspective, I think on the remote workforce, it certainly presented some challenges. Our biggest challenge, I think, for us was to get people understanding what MFA was that had never worked remote before, and really enrolling them to get them to understand the importance of multi-factor authentication, understand what it really was, what it is, try to explain to them, to a workforce that had never really, worked remotely before. But that being said, once I think you explain to people and, you can automate it the best you can, I think we've been able to mitigate it. I think the thought is it's still coming, the big one's coming, but I think, so far we've been able to leverage the infrastructure, leverage the systems and services that we have extended over the past couple of years and just extended it into this new environment, in continuing to monitor and manage and mitigate and notify as best we can.
Yeah, one of our basic challenges, believe it or not, was the simple task of desktop patching. How do you all of a sudden you change the process for desktop patching to a remote workforce? So the pushing out of March's patches was a little bit more troublesome than it was getting to April's patches. So as you can imagine, we've adapted and overcome those aspects of it. Let me ask you one last question on this theme here. With us being the IT leadership, respectively, in our states, from your perspective, has it been business as usual for you, or have you actually had to do any implementation of your continuity plan or anything along those lines? Stephanie, if you want to.
Sure. I would definitely say it has not been business as usual. Almost every day is something new is needed. That might be a slight exaggeration, but the thing we've tried to do is share with our agencies just really a can-do, our agencies and our teams, just to have a can-do attitude, and as opportunities present themselves, challenges, additional call center capability and support, just really striving to be seen as enablers and assist, and being able to assist to solve problems. So I think, I don't know that I'd say we've enacted a full business continuity as much as all hands on deck. What do you need? How can we best help you? And then, this is where the vendor community has been very helpful. I mean, obviously the amount of information and amount of emails we can help you do whatever you need has significantly increased. The benefit of that is we have had a number of partners who have really stepped up and helped us out. We've been able to quickly, in very short order, stand up additional capabilities for a number of our agencies. So I hope that answers your question, but I mean, generally every day there's some opportunity, and I'll add, to do something we've been potentially already talking about or trying to push with our agencies, but now, in an emergency situation, they're certainly more open to new technology, more likely to be open to newer technology than they were before. That's in that whole, and certainly not to make any light of the situation we're in, but that's in the category of not letting a good crisis go to waste, in terms of trying to leverage additional technology and capabilities for our agencies.
Yeah, I spot on, Stephanie. I mean, I think Massachusetts same. I think couple observations from mine is that I found in our organization, from a state IT organization, and we have central authority. However, we still have Secretary of Cabinet, CIOs that oversee the business app side. Our organization maintains the rest. But even internally in my organization, our IT staff had never really been considered essential personnel before, with the exception of a few. When I was at public safety, all my IT staff were always essential. They were always deployed during crisis. When our emergency operations center stood up, our state police activated a command post, the guard, whatever, the IT personnel were actually embedded in the organization. So they were always ready to go. They were jumping on command posts or helicopters or whatever it may be. The state IT workforce that I oversee now was never in that position. So we did identify them early on as being essential and core, meaning they had to come to work. Now that being said, understanding, the majority of the work that we can perform, or we do perform, can be handled remotely. However, we do have mail and print operations that can't. We do have, help desk and desk side support in some instances, providing, in the trenches, whether it be a correctional facilities or a state hospital. So what I found was that our union, our labor union here in Massachusetts, was a little bit kind of confused by that. However, I would say that they stepped up. I think our staff as well were a little bit, not ready for that designation. However, what I would say is that they really stepped up and really performed, again, more than I expected in these circumstances. And we certainly had people in our organization test positive and were high risk that we had to manage around and had to, provide alternative arrangements. To the point about readiness, I think, again, over the last couple of years, Massachusetts, when we talk about our COOP plan, again, I think it's like anything. I think, I guess government is like this. We tend to forget about things. I think we take things for granted and we kind of get stuck in the mud at times. I remember maybe 10, 15 years ago, the pandemic was a big area where our emergency management agency and all of our state organizations were always getting prepared for. And it seems to me like over the last several years or so, or maybe 10 years, that's kind of, been off the table a little bit, and there's been more focus on cybersecurity, even from the emergency management side, the guard side, things of that nature. However, activating on this demonstrated that, that good, it's like football. You don't forget you don't forget how to fall. You don't forget the roles. I think the good thing is our emergency management agencies, along with our guard and others, were ready, in that framework they had to be able to stand up very quickly and support. I think we felt the same way. We had made some progress over the past couple of years of putting, services in the cloud. I think, during our, immediate, 3-4 weeks, that was a godsend because, some of these applications would have never run in our state data centers. And we would have had some real challenges to scalability for especially our unemployment system and some other applications. So I think, we benefited from that. Now that also, like Stephanie referenced, and I believe this, I think this also gives us tremendous opportunity to think about this differently. And more importantly, I think it's given the business, like Stephanie said, and I agree with her 100%, that's really, from the governor to the cabinet to the, to the business leaders now understanding that, we can do things differently. I talk about, I've retooled my, conversations with folk now. I talk about availability, accessibility, resiliency, scalability versus, where it actually sits, and don't get into the argument about where it sits or the state data center. It's really about access to the systems and making sure they're available during crisis. And we've really flipped this around from an IT perspective to really start thinking about continuity of government services, which is really what we're all talking about. So that said, I think, the framework we had, we probably weren't as prepared as we should have been. However, I think we were able to adapt and we were able to scale up fairly quickly and plant the foundation here for us to actually make some great progress over the next couple of years, which has actually been on our technology strategy roadmap anyway. So we are accelerating a lot of this right now, and we're very I'm very excited about where we can get to in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and you both started talking a little bit on the aspects of business transformation. I remember being asked last week, what's my one takeaway from the pandemic? And my response was that government has finally realized what the private sector has known for years. Government can work remotely.
Right.
And that's going to change how we do things in the future. And so the business transformation opportunities are out there. Just the simplistic things of a unified communications platform now is no longer seen as a IT thing. The business is understanding the value that this is bringing to them and how it can change their workflows and how they can actually do things on a different basis. Let's talk a little bit about operating models, because we all are, interestingly enough, I think, a different operating model. I'm very decentralized in the state of Washington. I believe, Stephanie, you're centralized. And Kurt, you're kind of a hybrid approach. So, Kurt, I'll start with you. What are some of the challenges that you've seen with your operating model as it relates to stakeholder communication, interaction with local government entities? I don't know if you do that or not from your role as a state CIO. And as well as financial model impacts. I don't know if you're allocated from your appropriation or if you're a cost recovery type organization. So maybe you can take a couple of minutes and talk about that, please.
Sure. So in Massachusetts, over the past 10 years, we've been through certain reorganizations and centralization efforts, and we've had varying levels of success. in 2017, the governor created a new organization. Our organization created as an executive cabinet level position, both as a secretary, which I serve in, as well as a CIO. So we have very wide authority on everything, including oversight of all IT for the state. We focused on really from the center is providing infrastructure services, all technology infrastructure services. Excuse me. Cybersecurity network, help desk, desktop support, digital, all really is under our organization. What was left remaining at the business side were the business applications, and they're at the cabinet level, not at the agency level. So each secretariat or each cabinet has a CIO that has a direct report to their cabinet secretary and a dotted line report to me. And we have 8 additional cabinets besides myself. We have the majority of the IT organization for the state. From a communications and collaboration perspective, I mean, again, we have. I think that's one of our biggest challenges that we've always had over the years is what's the message from central IT and how do we do things, and we've worked very diligently over the past couple of years to really kind of strengthen that communication process and really make it more of a collaborative model. So we have routine meetings, we have routine planning exercise with our fellow CIOs. They have their own budget specific to their secretariat for their operations, their annual operations, whether it be local staff or application support, things of that nature. The rest of the money really comes through us. We have an appropriated account, plus we do have a chargeback account as well. So we operate in both worlds in that space. We're working on centralizing all the IT procurement. I have authority over anything over. When I say this, I say it with not the iron hammer. I don't mean it that way, but really from a framework perspective and a process perspective. Any project that's over $200,000, I have to approve, and any project that is over $250,000, they have to report annually. So we have this framework around this that works well. That being said, we also control a huge capital program as well, which is over a 5-year period, it's $1 billion. So we have that framework. Any new projects have to go through our investment advisory board, and we have to approve those. And we put roadmaps and plans together with deliverables. I think from an ability to be successful. Again, I think with my years of experience in government, understanding how government operates and how the businesses operate. Again, we work more in a collaborative fashion with our folks. We want to be able to set enterprise framework and standards. We have the certain services that they must procure from us. That being said, we believe in like I said, a collaborative model that we're trying to get to the point of success. I can say during this COVID environment, we were able to really, I think, excel collaboratively. Each of our CIOs, along with our our constitutional and our independent agencies as well. We have a great relationship with them from the courts and from our Inspector General's office, our Attorney General's office, all the folks that are independent or elected. We also have a great framework because they leverage our resources. So in Massachusetts, we're a fairly small state. We certainly have politics, no doubt, but overall, I think we've built out this real collaborative framework that the CIOs have a seat at the table. We're trying to make sure that business understands we have a seat at the table as well, and I think that's an area that I've been focused on. So that's kind of a hybrid model we have operating.
How about Stephanie, for you in Tennessee in a centralized model?
Yes, so Jim is correct. We're pretty highly centralized. We almost all of the executive branch agency IT teams are a part of my team. And I will say that we believe that because of that centralization, we were able to be more nimble when an agency needed something. Instead of them having to work through multiple layers, they essentially came to myself or my leadership team to say we have a need, and so we feel like more quickly deliver because there were fewer levels of folks to go through. You asked about local government. We have stayed in touch and offered support, but we do not yet have a very formal whole of government approach to supporting our local governments. We're working on that more from a cybersecurity standpoint. So more to come on that for us. And then from a budget standpoint, we are largely, we bill back for our services. So not much change there for us yet. Our budget for fiscal year 21 has been quite impacted. And unfortunately, I know this isn't exactly what you were asking, but a number of the initiatives new initiatives we had did not make the cut with the updated budget. So we have been beginning to look at and will be asked to figure out what can we continue to do without additional funding or with the funding that we have now. So I guess to summarize, in a highly centralized state, I think our operating model served us very well, and we were able to be more nimble.
Yeah, and we, again, even though being a decentralized model, I think the experience has been the same as it relates to the pandemic, because we all had to come together to do things differently. Our interaction with our local entities has really been around information sharing, especially on cyber type activities. We did provide some best practice documents and shared some highlights and tips that came from NASCIO's publication on the COVID response, and made those types of opportunities available for a lot of the local entities as well, to kind of help enable them to move forward and do so very cautiously in a safe and secure manner. Interestingly enough, being in a decentralized model, one of my biggest challenges was stopping everybody from running out and getting another tool. So it was interesting as I was listening to you guys, I was reflecting back on, as we've been trying to do our push to Microsoft Teams right now, I had a number of agencies rush out and buy Zoom. And the reason for buying Zoom was because they didn't have time to do the work to move to Microsoft Teams. And I kind of threw my hands up in the air and said, well, how do you have time to do Zoom? But we had those some of the challenges there as far as working in a decentralized model. But for the most part, everybody has come together. Everybody is working as a cohesive unit, which has been fantastic. And it has demonstrated and shown that there is value in a lot of the activities that we are doing to move our state forward. We talked a little bit about real world issues. I know Stephanie did mention the tornadoes that occurred in early March, and Curtis, I hate to do this, but I can't help myself, but the Red Sox collapse and Tom Brady's departure is probably your real world issue in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
But have you seen, has working remotely enabled response, or has it hindered response as far as any of the real world issues that you've been, that your states have encountered? I know for us, as an example, wildfire season is now, we're gearing up for that, but we're still in a stay-at-home order at least through the end of May in the state of Washington. What about for you two? And Stephanie, I'll start with you first, since you actually didn't encounter some natural disaster activity. What are your thoughts?
I think for us, the work from home, as our governors call it, do your part, stay apart. I think that's it. The work from home has really enabled us to, so let me back up. So in the tornado, with the direction was, don't come downtown, don't come and be curious and look, and we don't need additional traffic, we don't need additional people walking through the area. And so the work from home enabled us to all say, stay put, keep doing what you're doing, don't, and so really, and as Kurt alluded to earlier, I think we will continue to work from home well past this pandemic calming down. Maybe even never will we have our workforce back in the office 5 days a week. And so work from home, as we've said, has the fact that it can work and people are continuing to communicate and collaborate. Now, no doubt you have to try harder. You have to make an extra effort, to stay in touch with your teams, to stay in touch with executives and the administration, because you can't just physically walk in someone's office or call a meeting. But it is working. The naysayers are seeing that it's working, and I think for future situations, we'll all be much better prepared because of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think from our perspective, well, my perspective is that we've demonstrated that it can be done. Now, that being said, I still think we need to, understand the challenge ahead of us. I think sustainability is certainly going to be a challenge. I will say that from our administration, our governor, the feedback he gets from the business community here in Boston and Massachusetts is that, we certainly have, folks that want to get back to work, no doubt. The governor's appointed a get back to work advisory group that has a report due on May 18th. Our business right now is still closed until at least May 18th. I'm not sure how much longer ago. The schools are closed to the end of June. That being said, I think everybody understands that this is going to be a much, much different environment. I think especially in the Boston area. We had a program called Workforce 2030 before this, and that was part of our modern desktop or modern workforce environment as well. We suffer from great traffic congestion here in Boston, high rent, pollution, all the things, environmental challenges. So what we have seen from this is that, this has actually accelerated our position to be able to not be in the downtown Boston area as much as we are today. I mean, we're, our staff, and we're in many of the old office buildings in Boston that are honestly, over occupied. They're in tough shape. A lot of them are being scheduled to be rebuilt or refurbished or torn down. So I think, our building authority, our division of capital access in management, we're looking at different options. We have different opportunities now here. They're looking at leases, maybe not doing leases, really kind of reforming everything. So I think, from the ability to provide service, I think, there's certainly some areas we challenge with. I think, the management aspect of managing a remote workforce is not easy. I think what we have found, and anecdotally what I've found, is that, there's a whole group of people that have been working on telework for years that probably just, honestly, go home. They don't come in Monday, don't come in Friday. I'm not sure a lot of people, check everybody. They kind of, it's on a word of honor. Half jokingly, I've had a couple people in my organization, who've come forward that were teleworkers routinely, and they said, well, geez, I can't work from home. I don't have a laptop. And I said, well, okay, well, you've been working from home for 5 years on Mondays and Fridays, so I don't really understand that. Now, half kiddingly, I mean, there's probably challenges with family sharing computers. I get all that. But my point being is, I think from my management team's perspective, I think, we probably have a ways to go to learn how to manage from home. I think we need to learn how to, how do we do this model? Some folks in our state, I think, would like to be able to have, somebody tracking everybody's, clicks and everything. I'm not a big proponent of that. I think we're looking at more of, how do we provide for performance or, some type of metric like that? What are you really doing? Prioritize and start to look at, what services really can be done from home. We were able to stand up an AWS call center in 3 days to support our, work from our unemployment folks. And those folks were ready to go into a big building. And now we're starting to rethink that. Why do we need to put people into a building, into a state office building, when we can provide the same services from home? Now, that said, and I'll close on this, I think in being in government, I think one thing we really need to be aware of, and we're, at least up here in Boston, we suffer tremendously from media, attacks, and maybe attacks is too strong, but scrutiny, I should say, that, the government employee, what are they doing? Oh, they're just making a ton of money. They're working from home, blah, 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 blah. They're not the private sector. They don't know how to do this. I would challenge that we do. I think we need to be bold in government. I think we need to modernize our workforce. I think we need to modernize our ability to provide these services. And this is the way to go. So, I mean, I think, I look at it as a great opportunity to really, really, really change the way we provide these technology services and services to our constituents, and have a, probably a more efficient workforce, probably a workforce that is, happier, more productive. I mean, it's nice that you can spend a little bit more time at home in Boston. If you live outside the city and you're driving, it's taking you 2 or 3 hours a commute each day. So, I think there's some really upside to this.
Yeah. And so let's move forward. As the stay-at-home orders and the non-essential business closures were occurring, as well as remote teleworking opportunities, what we saw is digital inequity is really raising its ugly head. The fact that we do have underserved areas in the state of Washington from a broadband perspective, as we have children at home trying to get online for education and may or may not have that opportunity, especially as the economic impact from the pandemic is felt at home. Have you seen those types of challenges within your respective states? And do you have anything underway right now that's helping to address that? Stephanie, I'll start with you.
Okay. So our Department of Economic and Community Development leads our broadband initiative, and they continue every year to issue grants and really expand our reach. With our workforce, we had some feedback that they don't have internet service, surprisingly, or reliable internet service. And so we've really had to work with our Department of Human Resources to address those individual situations, if you will. Excuse me. I don't think for the workforce, it hasn't been as big an issue, but certainly our governor and the economic folks continue to push broadband expansion.
Curtis?
Yeah, so in Mass, I mean, we've had an ongoing initiative for quite some time now, probably last 7 or 8 years, called Mass Broadband Institute. Mass in the broadband, it's under our Housing and Economic Development Secretariat, and we partner with them. I would say that our western part of our state, we're not really rural in Massachusetts at all, but we do have some rural areas. And we've always had some internet service issues or cell site issues with the western part of the state. Verizon and AT&T have certainly, upped their game over the past, several years to bring, more cell coverage out to the western part of the state. FirstNet has helped with building some towers and availability out there. That we can leverage. I know it's for public safety, first responders, but we've also been able to leverage, I think, from a commercial carrier as well. Still focusing on internet. I do think that, one of my fellow secretaries is the Secretary of Education, and I think that's certainly a challenge in all our communities, whether it be the city of Boston or a small community. I think, especially with his remote education or work, online education from the school system is continues to be a challenge. I think, it's an area that's certainly a focus of our administration to make sure and to work with our local school districts and our, our higher education to make sure that we have the appropriate infrastructure or even devices. I mean, I think talk about inequity, and we certainly have a student population that, don't have access to internet at home. They don't have access to a device. So I think, our administration and our office, where we can, I mean, we provide grants as well, and we're working with our local communities, and our organization over the past couple of years through a capital program has we have a digital divide program with our local schools. So my office, I have a team of 5 people that work in municipal and school technology specifically, that work with the school districts and municipals to up the game from a cybersecurity perspective, from accessibility, from connectivity. So it's an ongoing initiative. It's not where it needs to be yet, but we're certainly aware of it. I think we're a fairly small state geographically, and I think politically, we have a good base here, that people get along, they work with each other. Our lieutenant governor is out in the community all the time, working with the folks, and we have that direct access. So it's not perfect, but we recognize it, and I think it certainly will be a priority, especially if we're still kind of figuring or putting plans to be remote in the fall, or at least a different way of teaching and learning, or providing government services, then we really need to make sure that we focus on that.
So let's talk a little bit about providing government services, and let's take the aspect of digital government. What's your state's respective maturity from a digital government aspect, and how has that helped you continue constituent services during this pandemic? Stephanie?
So I'd say Tennessee, we're still probably in an elementary stage for digital services. We did launch our MyTN app in February, and we have seen an uptick of users sign on and get an account over the last couple of months. I wouldn't say a dramatic increase, but we have seen an increase. I think with the demand, the volume and unprecedented demand with unemployment insurance, and then on the TANF side, our agencies have been willing to implement some additional technologies to increase digital connection with our citizen. So this is an area where I see that we can continue to grow that and really use this with other agencies to better prepare and implement more digital services. So we have a ways to go. I think this situation, the pandemic, will help us.
Curtis?
So we have, I would say that, well, first of all, we have on our planning board from our capital program is mymass.gov, really similar to what other states are doing, and really looking at having kind of that, digital front door, so to speak. We've not gotten there. We've kind of regrouped a little bit about our strategy from a couple of years ago. That said, we certainly have online services available in our Department of Motor Vehicles and our unemployment online, some of our major applications, SNAP benefits. I mean, we're fairly, mature in that space. I mean, some of it a little bit old in tooth, but we do have that available. I think this pandemic has certainly shown the light on, more to do, more need to do. I think what we've been able to do is add some services from a communications and texting and alerting, be more proactive. We've done more to support and scale up, with more chatbots and, a little bit of automation and AI to really kind of relieve the stress of the call centers, because that's really, at the end of the day, that's the biggest challenge we've had is managing the call centers for, some of these services, especially unemployment online. We're able to stand up apps fairly quickly. I think, we're certainly committed to digital services or more digital service. I think I want to be cautious though, and, understand what that really means, because I think, we could get caught up in kind of this big old strategy and just never get out of the box. So I think we need to kind of rethink about how we're going to go forward and do that. But I think, our licensing applications and things like that, we've made some great progress in different platforms. We're a little bit all over the place, and it's what I would say is that it's more business driven than it is from a consolidated strategy yet, although our mass.gov environment kind of pushes it that way, but we're not there yet. And we've chose at this point not to interfere with the day-to-day, because it's actually working. But I do think it gives us, again, I use the word opportunity to rethink this and prioritize it, but understand, what we can do and what we can't do. I just don't want to get caught up in something so big that we actually can't do anything. So that's kind of where we're at.
So I know we got a few minutes left here, a couple more themes. So as we continue to be in the midst of this pandemic, have you seen more of an adoption of enterprise-based services as opposed to the way business was always done in the past? And maybe more importantly, have you seen your role transitioning more from being a service provider to more of a service broker model? So Curtis, I'll start with you, since you're not as centralized as Stephanie is.
Yeah, I think we were in this mode anyway. I think that, when I took this position in 18, actually, we had this kind of directive that, we're going to make everything go from the middle. I mean, again, being around government my whole life, I mean, sometimes like, okay, that sounds great, but how do you actually implement that? And how do you, how do you achieve success? And, over the past year or so, I've really focused on the business side of things, to working with my fellow agencies and secretariats to kind of convince them from a business perspective versus just strictly technology. And I think we've made some success. I think right now we're refocusing on really this enterprise framework. I think it's certainly, I think, again, benefited us that we were able to be so successful and manage things from the center, whether it be from a procurement perspective or from a security, or being able to scale up services on demand while not having to make multiple decisions. I could make the decision, and this is the way we're going, work with the folks and really kind of be a resource for folks. And if agencies or secretariats were struggling on individual needs, then they could come to us and we could frame it up for them. So I think that, I think my office also, and it's nice to actually have a seat at the table at cabinet with the governor and my fellow secretariats. And I don't say this lightly, but it really does help that, you have access and you can have a voice that you can say, listen, this is just nuts. You can't do this way. Even right now, as we look, here's a perfect example. And I feel very strongly about this. Now we have our state human resources division who has been tasked with starting to put down a back to work kind of strategy for our state employee workforce. And my chief of staff, and he's probably on here today, Brian Domoretsky, he's my rep. And I was very clear to Brian, and I said, I don't want this to be about technology, because what will happen is we will have all of our agencies and they will tell you all of the technology deficiencies they have. And that's not really what we're talking about here. You need to kind of make sure we can manage this conversation and manage this back to work by understanding what access they need or what their role or job is going to be. And we'll take care of the technology. I don't need 150 agencies or other CIOs getting stuck in the mud on, bandwidth, or stuck on VPN, or stuck on multi-factor authentication, because that's what will happen. And they'll be coming up with their own solutions, and we'll be back again trying to solve and have 113 different solutions to do this, versus actually understanding what is it that you need access, what is, and put it back in the business. What are you allowing to work from home? What are your priorities? What are your core, what do you need to get done? And then we can build a technology platform around it, because we already have it. So it really kind of changing that conversation a little bit and not reacting to it has been the biggest thing for us. And that's where I think, a strong CIO or a cabinet secretary can really make hay here. And I think this has proven that we all deserve a seat at the table and need a seat at the table to advise the folks of how we do it. And don't get caught up in fixing printers and kind of getting stuck in that mud where everybody else is making decisions where they should be focused on the business side of things. That's how we've been handling it here.
So Stephanie, how about you? Since you're already in a very centralized model, is there a difference?
I do think we have seen and will continue to see that my role evolve to more of the service broker. And in this situation, there are a number of daily stand-up calls with the administration, with our Department of Health, Department of Labor, where I'm included. And I just keep my ears open for problems they're trying to solve, and then come back with, okay, here's two options. We have experience with this one. We'd recommend this, and usually that's going to be a vendor or a third party in this situation. So my role will continue, I think, to be more of that service as a broker. And so then it would just, to Curtis's point, it just becomes imperative that we have a seat at the table and have a chance to listen and hear what the challenges are, and then bring the best solution.
Right.
I was going to say, in my case, I think the pandemic opened the door for opportunity, and the economic impact is going to allow me to walk through and do some things differently here in the state of Washington as well. Hey, final question. So if you could go back, as we sat here and we reflected, and we, again, in our roles, we all often do self-reflection. If there's one thing you could do over again, as you look at how you enabled your state to get to where it is, what would be maybe that one thing you might think about? If I could have done this a little bit differently, I would have had a better outcome. Out of curiosity, Stephanie, you got anything?
Well, if I can answer it with what I wish we'd done before all this happened is mandated laptops, and that may seem like a small thing, but it'll be a challenge as we return to work. As people do come into the office, we're going to support a workstation a desktop and a laptop. So that's not huge, but had we done that, the scramble to purchase, wouldn't have been as hard as it was.
How about you, Curtis?
Yeah, I think that's an area of concern as I had too. I think, we had a program underway, and it wasn't, we got caught up in a little bit, from a financial perspective of, dilly and dallying about costs and everything. And, we got slowed down a little bit on our 365 and procurement, honestly, if we would have been on time last year, we wouldn't have had the challenges that we have today. Now, that being said, I think it's worked out. What I would say, though, is that I think, I would say this, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, and I think Stephanie mentioned earlier, and you have, Jim, is that I'll take a positive out of this. What I have seen is that a workforce that has come together from an IT perspective, that has some of my folks that, over the years, different perspective on things, I think have really gelled as a team. I also think that our vendor community has stepped up tremendously. And for the most part, it's not been about selling us anything. I think for the most part, most of our vendors, if not all, have really been at the table with us to help, because they're part of our community, both at a national and a state or local. And I think that, honestly, I think, it's given me even more respect for what they do every day. I think it's also demonstrated the ability to work in crisis that, not everybody does. So I think, an area that I wished I was a little bit more advanced on is readiness and preparedness. I think that's my theme at this point, I transitioned from my public safety days into this now, but I really mean from an IT perspective. I think, the readiness and preparedness framework that is actually, a cornerstone of emergency management or military or public safety or, other forms of government is really, it can transition right into this. And that's where I think we'll all benefit from this and understanding, what continuity, and it's actually redefined what continuity of government really means. And I think that's where we really, really can make some great strides. Although I'm very, very pleased with, what everybody's been able to do under these circumstances, and have personal, challenges as well. It's sometimes it's folks providing these services that never really impact, like a tornado. I know, it's one part of the state. It could be a large part of the state, but not everybody. But this, everybody's experiencing, including right. Your workforce, which is a challenge. Your first responders, the guard, whomever, they're all part of this. And I think coming together in this has been tremendous experience for folks.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all for your various perspectives. We do have a few questions that I see in the dialogue box here. So the first one is, besides laptops and VPN ecosystems, what other methods are states enabling work from home? Stephanie, are you guys doing anything outside of VPN as far as enabling remote workforce?
Well, we're a WebEx state, and then we do use Jabber for our phones and instant messaging, and those are all sort of formally a part of our work from home list of products, and we provide training and support for all of those communication and collaboration tools and technologies.
Curtis.
Yep. So we're teams. I mean, right now we're big investment in Microsoft, and we've rolled out. And the other thing here, we were able to roll out, accelerate our 365 deployment and deploy Teams and SharePoint online to everybody. So we certainly have WebEx. We have some other products as well. And I think one of the challenges we've had, as well as people just buying their own products, that's certainly been a challenge. So we're working on that. I think we have some of the other tools. I think from a soft phone clients and using VoIP, in the cloud, from a phone service for call centers. And we've certainly, stood it up fairly quickly with our vendor partners as well. Again, I think, the VPN, we certainly, we've suffered from challenge with VPN over the years from a capacity perspective. We were able to deploy our own VPN in the middle of this, so I think is very helpful for us. And, we look forward to adjusting as we go. So those are some of the areas we're focused on.
Okay, and our next question is, it sounds like technology is now being seen as a much more important part of your state's business. What was one of your agency's biggest aha moments about technology? I'll take that one briefly. For us, it was really that things like unified communications is not an IT thing. It is a business transformation opportunity, and the business now is starting to adopt it and understand its capabilities and how it can impact their day-to-day operations. It sounds like both of you have had the same type of experience. Is there a particular moment you may want to call out quickly?
I would say for our Department of Human Services, just adding additional call center capability that sort of wraps it all together was maybe somewhat of a positive aha moment of, with vendor partners that can do soup to nuts instead of trying to piecemeal pieces, really going with a large vendor that could deliver the whole enchilada, so to speak.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think for us, I mean, we were able to, we were able to roll out an alerting platform, what we call it Alerts MA, where really the governor could send out messaging, to the population. We've developed some COVID, testing and COVID tracing as well. I think our office has been involved in all of that. We've been at the forefront working with the telco providers to make sure that, the numbers show up, the appropriate numbers show up in the calling. These are things that are really kind of, people think they just appear without people injecting themselves. But, our office working on our digital team, working with all of our agencies to, better form communications and messaging as well, and better position on our mass.gov environment, better communications tool. The other area that we really focused on, which we were a little bit light on, was multilingual. So we've been able to stand up, enhance our mass.gov environment or our unemployment applications and, go into multiple language sets and interpretation and skills and forms and, really about that call center, just really about communication, because it boils down to, how can we better interact with our constituents? How can we better, respond to them? And I think, again, overall, government has done a pretty good job. And that's not technology, but it's certainly enabled by technology. And I think the one thing I've seen is the business community and the agencies and the tech groups coming together hand in hand has been tremendous.
Okay, and Stephanie, there's a few more questions that are specific to Tennessee that some of the community has asked, so I won't read those here online. If you want to address those in the chat or however, I'll let you do that. So in the interest of time, I know we're almost at the bottom of the hour, and I want to enable our president to have any closing comments or remarks that he may have for this morning's session. I personally want to thank both of you for agreeing to participate and do this very informative discussion. And as always, it's great to see both of you. And hopefully it won't be long until we can do it in person. Dennis, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you all. Jim, Kurt, Stephanie, great stuff. I really appreciate that. And I know that, in my role as the NASCIO president, I've been able to see a lot of different stuff that states are dealing with respect to COVID-19. And one of the things that Stephanie said really resonated with me from my experience with other CIOs, both state CIOs as well as city and county CIOs, is that almost every day is something new. That really resonated with me. And then, that transition between something new and the strong leadership we're seeing from CIOs that becomes then, it results in adapting and overcoming in creative ways. So, that to me is the overall takeaway. I really appreciate the time and effort you guys put into to making your states run the way they need to run in this really challenging time. I also want to highlight that NASCIO has a COVID-19 resource library on our website. This includes a NASCIO guidance document that has been and will continue to be updated as we move through this situation. The library also has links to other resources of relevance to state IT. A big thank you to our private sector partners for submitting resources. Those are all also posted there. If you haven't submitted thought leadership, go to nascio.org, visit the library, and there's a form to submit at the bottom of the page. As I mentioned at the start, all members have been added to the Virtual Networking Lounge group. Please move over there and discuss what we have just heard and just say hello to one another. NASCIO loves to give away swag and host contests, and we'll be selecting folks using the lounge to receive prizes. We are hosting Twitter contests as well. Make sure you follow NASCIO on Twitter and tweet about the mid-year webcast series with the hashtag NASCIO20. We have an announcement this afternoon at the Corporate Member Exchange call on another way we're keeping everyone connected, specifically states and private sector partners. Please join that call if you're a corporate member or visit the NASCIO website this afternoon for information on the state CIO Roundtable chats. Thank you for joining this session, and I hope to see everyone on another session later today or tomorrow.